Sergeant Thompson had processed thousands of suspects during his 20-year career, but none had prepared him for booking the Queen Consort. He reviewed the arrest details on his computer screen, double-checking every detail to ensure absolute accuracy. "Ma'am," Thompson began, his voice carefully professional, "I need to take your personal details for the custody record. Full name, date of birth, and current address." Camilla stared at him in disbelief. "Surely you already know who I am." "Ma'am, I need you to state your details for the record, regardless of what I may already know." Camilla sighed heavily. Camilla Rosemary Parker Bowles Windsor. July 17, 1947. Clarence House, London. Thompson typed the information methodically, treating her no differently than any other detainee. "Do you have any medical conditions or injuries that require attention?" "High blood pressure," Camilla replied quietly. "I take medication for it daily." "When did you last take your medication?" "This morning, around 7:30. Morrison watched the proceedings from the corner of the room, marveling at how the ordinary processes of criminal justice were being applied to someone who had been above such concerns for decades. The equality of treatment, regardless of status, was both jarring and reassuring. Thompson continued with the standard questions. "Do you have any allergies or dietary requirements?" "Shellfish allergy," Camilla answered mechanically. "And I'm lactose intolerant." "Are you currently under the influence of alcohol or drugs?" Camilla's head snapped up, her eyes flashing with indignation. "Certainly not. Ma'am, I have to ask these questions of everyone who comes through here. It's not personal." The reminder that she was being processed like any common criminal seemed to deflate Camilla's brief burst of anger. She slumped back in her chair, looking older and more fragile than her public persona ever suggested. "Do you wish to contact a solicitor?" Thompson continued. "Yes," Camilla replied immediately. "I want to speak to Jeffrey Hamilton from Hamilton, Wells, and Associates. He's handled the family's legal matters for years." "I'll arrange for you to make that call once we've completed the processing," Thompson assured her. "Is there anyone else you'd like us to notify of your detention?" Camilla hesitated, clearly thinking about King Charles. "My husband should be informed, but I understand that's already being arranged." Morrison's radio buzzed again. "Morrison, control here. The King's private secretary is requesting immediate access to speak with you. The King is extremely concerned about reports of an incident involving the Queen Consort." Morrison stepped into the corridor to take the call. "Morrison here." "Captain," came the voice of Sir Edward Hamilton, the King's private secretary. "His Majesty requires an immediate briefing on the situation involving Her Majesty the Queen Consort. He's been informed that there was some sort of security incident." Morrison chose his words carefully. "Sir Edward, there was indeed a serious incident involving Her Majesty and Her Royal Highness Princess Charlotte. The Queen Consort is currently being processed in the custody suite following her arrest for assault." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several seconds. "Captain, did you just tell me that the Queen Consort has been arrested?" "Yes, Sir Edward. I witnessed Her Majesty spit directly onto Princess Charlotte's face during a verbal altercation. As the incident constituted an assault on a member of the royal family, I was obligated to take her into custody." "Dear God," Sir Edward whispered. "His Majesty needs to be informed immediately. Where is Princess Charlotte now?" "Her Royal Highness is safe and unharmed. She provided a full statement and has requested that proper procedures be followed regardless of the identity of the perpetrator." "Captain, I need you to understand the gravity of this situation. The implications for the monarchy could be catastrophic. Is there any way this matter can be handled privately?" Morrison had been expecting this question and had already considered his response. "Sir Edward, the assault was witnessed by multiple royal protection officers and has been formally documented. Princess Charlotte has specifically requested that the matter be handled through proper legal channels. I'm afraid it's beyond the point where it can be contained privately." Sir Edward's sigh was audible over the radio. "Very well. I'll inform His Majesty immediately. He'll want to speak with both you and Princess Charlotte as soon as possible." "Of course, Sir Edward. We'll be available at His Majesty's convenience." Morrison returned to the custody suite to find that Thompson had completed the basic processing. Camilla sat in her chair looking dazed and defeated, as if the reality of her situation was finally sinking in completely. "Captain," Thompson reported, "the suspect has been processed and her legal counsel has been contacted. Mr. Hamilton is en route and should arrive within the hour. Thank you, Sergeant. Has a cell been prepared? Camilla looked up sharply. A cell? You're actually going to put me in a cell? Ma'am, Morrison replied gently. Standard procedure requires that suspects be held in secure accommodation until they can be interviewed or released on bail. This is humiliating, Camilla whispered, tears beginning to form in her eyes for the first time since the incident. Morrison felt a pang of sympathy despite everything that had happened. Ma'am, we've prepared the most comfortable accommodation available. You'll have privacy and access to refreshments. The cell that had been prepared for Camilla was indeed the best available, larger than the standard holding cells, and equipped with a proper bed rather than a bench. But it was still unmistakably a cell, with metal doors and barred windows that emphasized her changed status. As Camilla was escorted to her accommodation, Morrison's radio crackled again. Morrison, this is Control. Princess Charlotte is requesting to speak with you in the blue drawing room. On my way, Morrison replied, glad for the opportunity to check on Charlotte's well-being. He found the princess standing by the tall windows of the blue drawing room, looking out at the palace gardens where her day had begun so normally. She had changed clothes since the incident, now wearing a simple black dress that seemed appropriate for the somber turn of events. Your Royal Highness, Morrison said as he entered. How are you feeling? Charlotte turned from the window, and Morrison was struck by how much she had aged in the past few hours. The weight of her decision was clearly affecting her, despite her outward composure. I keep asking myself if I did the right thing, she said quietly. Part of me wonders if I should have just let it go, handled it privately within the family. Morrison considered his response carefully. Your Royal Highness, if I may speak plainly, what happened today wasn't just a family disagreement. It was an assault that would have resulted in arrest regardless of who committed it or who the victim was. You simply ensured that the same standards apply to everyone. Charlotte nodded slowly. That's what I keep telling myself. But the consequences for the family, for the monarchy. May I ask you something, Your Royal Highness? Morrison interrupted gently. What kind of message would it send if members of the royal family were above the law? What would that say about the principles of justice and equality that the monarchy is supposed to represent? You're right, of course, Charlotte replied. It's just difficult when you know that your decision will hurt people you care about, even when they've hurt you first. Morrison's radio buzzed with an urgent message. Morrison, Control here. King Charles has arrived at the palace and is requesting an immediate meeting with you and Princess Charlotte in his private study. Charlotte straightened her shoulders, visibly preparing herself for what would undoubtedly be one of the most difficult conversations of her life. Time to face father, she said with grim determination. The walk to King Charles's study felt endless. Morrison could feel the tension radiating from Charlotte as they made their way through corridors that seemed unusually quiet. Staff members they encountered along the way bowed respectfully, but avoided eye contact, clearly aware that something unprecedented was happening. King Charles was pacing behind his desk when they arrived, his face etched with worry and disbelief. At 76 years old, he had weathered many crises during his long wait to become king, but nothing had prepared him for this situation. Charlotte, he said as soon as they entered, please tell me there's been some sort of misunderstanding. Charlotte met her father's eyes with quiet resolve. I'm afraid not, father. Camilla assaulted me, and I've asked that the matter be handled through proper legal channels. King Charles sank into his chair, suddenly, looking every one of his 76 years. Do you realize what this means? The scandal will destroy us. The media will have a field day. Father, Charlotte said firmly, the scandal would be far worse if word got out that members of the royal family are above the law. At least this way, we're demonstrating that justice applies to everyone equally. Captain Morrison, the king addressed him directly. Walk me through exactly what happened. Morrison provided a detailed account of the incident, from the initial verbal altercation through Camilla's arrest and processing. King Charles listened in stunned silence, his face growing paler with each detail. She actually spat on you? He asked Charlotte, his voice barely above a whisper. Yes, father. In full view of Captain Morrison and his team, King Charles covered his face with his hands, struggling to process the implications. The woman I married, the woman I've defended for decades, spat on my daughter. My God, what have we come to? Father, Charlotte said gently, I know this is difficult for you, but we can't ignore what happened or sweep it under the rug. The monarchy's credibility depends on our willingness to live by the same standards we expect from everyone else. King Charles looked up at his daughter with a mixture of pride and anguish. You're absolutely right, of course. It's just, the personal cost is devastating. I know, Charlotte replied, her voice soft with sympathy. I'm sorry it came to this. The king's private secretary, Sir Edward, entered the room with a grave expression. Your Majesty, I've been fielding calls from the media all afternoon. Somehow word of the incident has leaked, and they're demanding statements. King Charles closed his eyes in despair. How much do they know? Details are sparse, but they know the Queen Consort has been detained, and that it involves an incident with Princess Charlotte. The speculation is becoming quite wild. Morrison stepped forward. Your Majesty, with your permission, I'd like to suggest that we release a carefully worded statement confirming the basic facts before rumors become completely out of control. What would you suggest? King Charles asked wearily. A simple statement confirming that there was a family incident that resulted in the Queen Consort being detained for questioning. Emphasize that the matter is being handled through proper legal channels, and that the royal family is cooperating fully with the investigation. Charlotte nodded approvingly. That strikes the right tone. It acknowledges what happened without sensationalizing it. King Charles considered the suggestion, clearly weighing the options. Very well. Sir Edward, please work with the press office to draft something along those lines. And make it clear that there will be no further comment while the legal process is ongoing. Of course, Your Majesty, Sir Edward replied, already reaching for his phone to coordinate the response. As evening approached, news of the unprecedented arrest began to dominate headlines around the world. The carefully crafted palace statement did little to quell the media frenzy, but it at least ensured that the initial reporting was based on facts rather than pure speculation. Morrison found himself at the center of a historical moment that would be remembered for generations. The decision to arrest the Queen Consort had tested every principle of law enforcement and royal protocol, but he was confident that justice had been served. In her cell, Camilla met with her solicitor, Geoffrey Hamilton, a distinguished lawyer who had served the royal family for over 30 years. Even he struggled to process the unprecedented nature of the charges his client faced. Your Majesty, Hamilton said carefully, I have to advise you that the evidence against you is quite strong. Captain Morrison's witness testimony, combined with Princess Charlotte's statement, presents a clear case of assault. Camilla stared at the cell wall, finally, understanding the full consequences of her moment of rage. What happens now? You'll be interviewed under caution tomorrow morning. Depending on the outcome of that interview and the Crown Prosecution Service's assessment, you could face formal charges. What kind of sentence are we talking about? Camilla asked quietly. Hamilton consulted his notes. For a simple assault charge, especially for a first-time offender of your age, you'd likely face a fine and possibly community service. However, the victim's status and the public nature of the offense could result in more serious consequences. As night fell over Buckingham Palace, the full magnitude of the day's events began to settle over everyone involved. Charlotte spent the evening in her private apartments, reflecting on the decision that had changed everything. She felt no regret about seeking justice, but the personal cost was already becoming clear. King Charles faced the most difficult night of his reign, torn between his love for his wife and his duty to support his daughter's pursuit of justice. The monarchy he had waited so long to lead was facing its greatest crisis in decades, and the resolution would define his legacy. Morrison completed his final reports of the day, documenting every detail of the historic arrest. He had served the royal family faithfully for over 20 years, but today he had served something even more important, the principle that no one, regardless of their position or status, is above the law. The story of the Queen Consort's arrest for assaulting the future queen would dominate headlines for weeks to come, but its true significance lay in the message it sent about justice, accountability, and the rule of law. In seeking consequences for Camilla's actions, Charlotte had demonstrated the kind of leadership that would define her eventual reign, principled, fair, and unwavering in the face of pressure to compromise her values. The palace fell quiet as midnight approached, but the reverberations of the day's events would continue to shape the monarchy for years to come. A young princess had become a true leader, a queen consort had fallen from grace, and a king had learned that sometimes doing the right thing requires sacrificing what you hold most dear. The crown would endure, but it would be forever changed by the courage of one young woman who refused to accept that justice was negotiable. The morning sun cast long shadows across the manicured gardens of Buckingham Palace as Princess Charlotte walked alongside her personal security detail. At 19 years old, she carried herself with the poise expected of someone who would one day wear the crown. Her auburn hair caught the light as she reviewed the day's schedule on her tablet, preparing for another round of royal duties that seemed to multiply with each passing month. Charlotte had grown accustomed to the weight of expectation that rested on her shoulders. As the eldest child of Prince William and Catherine, she understood that her every move was watched, analyzed, and criticized by both the media and the public. Today's engagement was particularly important, a charity gala for children's hospitals that she had been planning for months. The palace corridors buzzed with their usual morning activity. Staff members hurried past carrying silver trays, fresh flowers, and official documents. Charlotte nodded politely to each person she encountered, a habit instilled in her from childhood. Her grandmother, Queen Elizabeth, had always emphasized the importance of acknowledging everyone who served the royal family, regardless of their position. Captain James Morrison, head of Charlotte's security team, walked 3 steps behind her. At 45 years old, he had served the royal family for over 2 decades. His sharp eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, looking for anything out of place. Morrison had protected Charlotte since she was 12, and he felt a paternal responsibility toward the young princess that went beyond his professional duties. "Your Royal Highness," Morrison said quietly, "there's been a change to today's schedule. The Queen Consort has requested a private meeting before your departure for the charity event." Charlotte paused in her stride, her brow furrowing slightly. Camilla rarely requested unscheduled meetings, and, when she did, it usually meant trouble. The relationship between Charlotte and her step-grandmother had always been complicated, marked by tension that everyone in the palace could feel but nobody dared discuss openly. "Did she mention what this concerns?" Charlotte asked, her voice carefully neutral. "I'm afraid not, Your Royal Highness. She simply said it was urgent and couldn't wait." Charlotte sighed softly and adjusted her pale blue blazer. She had chosen her outfit carefully that morning, professional yet approachable for the hospital visit. Now she wondered if she should have selected something more formal, more armor-like for whatever confrontation awaited her. The walk to Camilla's private study seemed longer than usual. Charlotte's heels clicked against the polished marble floors as she made her way through the palace's endless corridors. Portraits of her ancestors lined the walls, their painted eyes seeming to follow her progress. She drew strength from their presence, reminding herself that she came from a long line of strong women who had faced far greater challenges than a difficult family meeting. When they reached the ornate double doors of Camilla's study, Morrison stepped forward to announce Charlotte's arrival. The doors opened to reveal Camilla standing behind her mahogany desk, her expression stern and uncompromising. "I believe that's not only appropriate, but necessary for someone in my position. You embarrassed your father and undermined the monarchy's political neutrality." Camilla shot back, her voice rising. "Your grandmother Elizabeth understood the importance of staying above politics. Clearly, that lesson was lost on you." Charlotte felt her temper beginning to flare, but she kept her voice steady. "My grandmother also understood that silence in the face of crisis is complicity. Climate change affects everyone, including the people we're supposed to serve." "Don't lecture me about duty," Camilla snapped. "I've been serving this family and this country since before you were born. Your naive idealism is a luxury we can't afford." "Naive idealism?" Charlotte repeated, her voice sharp with indignation. "Is that what you call caring about the future of our planet and our people?" Morrison shifted uncomfortably near the door, his hand instinctively moving closer to his radio. He had witnessed many heated exchanges in his years of service, but there was something different about this confrontation. The air seemed to crackle with an intensity that made him uneasy. Camilla moved around the desk, closing the distance between herself Charlotte, you think you're so much better than the rest of us, don't you? So pure and righteous. But you're nothing but a spoiled child playing dress-up in clothes you haven't earned. Charlotte's face flushed, but she held her ground. I've earned my place through years of preparation and service. I've visited hospitals, schools, and communities across the Commonwealth. I've studied constitutional law, international relations, and public administration. What have you earned except a crown you married into? The words hung in the air like a physical blow. Morrison took a step forward, recognizing the dangerous territory they were entering. Palace protocol demanded that such conversations remain civil, even when they dealt with sensitive family matters. Your Royal Highness, Morrison said quietly. Perhaps this discussion might be better continued at a later time when emotions have cooled. Camilla whirled toward him, her face contorted with rage. Don't you dare presume to interfere in family matters. Know your place. Charlotte stepped protectively toward Morrison. Captain Morrison was offering sound advice. Perhaps you should consider taking it. Sound advice. Camilla's voice dripped with contempt. From a glorified bodyguard? You surround yourself with commoners and think their opinions matter. You've forgotten what it means to be royal. I know exactly what it means to be royal, Charlotte replied firmly. It means service, sacrifice, and putting the needs of others before your own. It means treating everyone with dignity and respect, regardless of their background or position. Camilla's laugh was cold and bitter. How wonderfully noble of you. But nobility doesn't pay the bills or maintain our relevance in a changing world. Your idealistic speeches might win you applause from university students, but they won't secure the monarchy's future. The monarchy's future depends on our ability to remain relevant and connected to the people we serve, Charlotte countered. Hiding behind tradition and refusing to address real issues won't save us. It will make us obsolete. Obsolete. Camilla's voice rose to nearly a shout. This institution has survived for over 1,000 years. It will survive long after your generation's foolish experiments have been forgotten. Charlotte shook her head sadly. That kind of thinking is exactly why support for the monarchy is declining among young people. They see us as out of touch, irrelevant, and unwilling to address the challenges they face every day. Let them eat cake, is that it? Camilla sneered. You think giving pretty speeches about climate change will make them love you? You're deluding yourself. They tolerate us at best, and your pandering won't change that. Morrison watched the exchange with growing concern. Both women were far beyond the bounds of normal royal discourse, and he could see that the situation was spiraling towards something dangerous. His training told him to intervene, but his position made that nearly impossible without invitation from Charlotte. I'm not pandering, Charlotte said firmly. I'm trying to ensure that this institution remains meaningful and relevant for future generations. If that threatens you, perhaps you should examine why. Camilla's face turned an alarming shade of red. Threatens me? You arrogant little girl. I've been defending this family's reputation while you were still in diapers. I won't stand here and be lectured by someone who thinks a few university courses make her an expert on governance. My education is certainly more comprehensive than yours was when you married into this family, Charlotte replied coolly. At least I understand the constitutional framework within which we operate. The insult hit its mark. Camilla had always been sensitive about her lack of formal preparation for royal life, having come to her role through marriage rather than birth. Her face contorted with fury as she struggled to find words cutting enough to match Charlotte's verbal precision. You sanctimonious little brat, Camilla hissed. You think your birth gives you the right to judge me? You're nothing but an accident of genetics who happened to be born into the right family at the right time. Charlotte's composure finally cracked slightly. At least I was born into it. I didn't have to destroy another woman's marriage to get here. The reference to Diana hit like a physical blow. Camilla's face went white, then red again as pure rage took control. Morrison stepped forward, recognizing the moment when words would no longer suffice to contain the explosion that was building. That's enough, Camilla screamed. How dare you bring her into this? You don't know anything about what happened or what I sacrificed. I know enough, Charlotte replied, her voice deadly quiet now. I know that actions have consequences, and that some things can never be forgiven or forgotten. Camilla's hand flew to her chest as if Charlotte's words had caused physical pain. For a moment, Morrison thought the older woman might collapse from the intensity of her emotion. But, instead, she seemed to gather herself, drawing on reserves of anger and resentment that had been building for years. You want to talk about consequences? Camilla's voice was low and dangerous now. Let me tell you about consequences. Your precious grandmother Elizabeth spent decades trying to modernize this institution, and where did it get her? Scandal after scandal, divorce after divorce, and a younger generation that questions our very existence. Charlotte remained silent, recognizing that Camilla was revealing more about her own insecurities and fears than she intended. I won't make the same mistakes, Camilla continued. This family will maintain its dignity and its distance from the rabble. We don't apologize, we don't explain, and we certainly don't pander to every fashionable cause that captures the public's imagination for 5 minutes. Even if that means becoming irrelevant, Charlotte asked quietly. Better irrelevant than degraded, Camilla snapped. Better to be respected from afar than to be familiar and, therefore, contemptible. Morrison glanced at his watch, noting that Charlotte's departure time for the charity event was rapidly approaching. He cleared his throat softly, hoping to remind both women that there were practical considerations that needed attention. Your Royal Highness, he said carefully. The car will be ready for departure in 15 minutes. Camilla turned on him with renewed fury. Don't you dare interrupt this conversation again. When I want your input, I'll ask for it. Charlotte stepped between Morrison and Camilla, her protective instincts fully engaged. Captain Morrison is simply doing his job. The same job he's done faithfully for this family for over 20 years. His job is to follow orders, not to think, Camilla retorted. Something you might learn from him. The insult to Morrison's intelligence was the final straw for Charlotte. Her careful composure shattered completely as she faced the woman who had just demeaned someone under her protection. Captain Morrison has more honor and integrity in his little finger than you have in your entire body, Charlotte said, her voice shaking with controlled rage. He's served this family with distinction while you've spent your time plotting and scheming to secure your position. Camilla's face twisted with pure hatred. In that moment, years of resentment, jealousy, and frustration boiled over into something ugly and primitive. She stepped forward until she was mere inches from Charlotte's face, her breath hot with anger. You spoiled, ungrateful little witch, Camilla snarled. I should have put you in your place years ago. What happened next would be remembered by everyone present for the rest of their lives. In a moment of complete loss of control, Camilla gathered saliva in her mouth and spat directly into Charlotte's face. The silence that followed was deafening. Morrison stood frozen in shock, his mind struggling to process what he had just witnessed. Charlotte remained perfectly still, feeling the warm spittle on her cheek, but unable to move or speak. Camilla seemed equally shocked by her own actions. She took a step backward, her hand flying to her mouth as if she could somehow take back what she had just done. Her face went pale as the full implications of her behavior began to register. Morrison was the first to recover. His training kicked in automatically, and he moved swiftly toward Charlotte with a clean handkerchief. But his mind was racing through protocols and procedures, trying to determine what should happen next. Your Royal Highness, he said softly to Charlotte, offering the handkerchief while his other hand moved to his radio. Charlotte accepted the handkerchief with trembling fingers and carefully wiped her face. When she looked up, her eyes were blazing with a cold fury that Morrison had never seen before. She was no longer the polite, well-mannered princess he had been protecting. She was a future queen who had been gravely insulted, and her entire demeanor had shifted to reflect that reality. Captain Morrison, Charlotte said in a voice that was steady but carried the unmistakable tone of royal command. I believe you witnessed an assault on my person. Morrison's heart sank as he realized the full implications of what Charlotte was asking. He had indeed witnessed an assault, and his duty was clear, even if the perpetrator was the queen consort. Yes, Your Royal Highness, he replied formally. I did witness such an incident. Camilla seemed to snap out of her shocked paralysis. You can't be serious, she said, her voice rising with panic. It was just a family argument that got out of hand. Surely we can handle this privately. Charlotte turned to face her, and Morrison was struck by how much she suddenly, resembled her great-grandmother Elizabeth in her most regal moments. There was no trace of the 19-year-old girl who had entered the room. In her place stood a future monarch who would not tolerate being treated with such disrespect. "There is nothing private about spitting on the heir to the throne," Charlotte said with icy precision. "Captain Morrison has witnessed a criminal assault, and he will carry out his duties accordingly." Morrison felt the weight of history pressing down on him as he reached for his radio. In all his years of service, he had never imagined he would face a situation like this. But his oath was clear. He had sworn to protect and serve the royal family, and that meant protecting Charlotte from all threats, regardless of their source. Morrison's hand trembled slightly as he activated his radio, knowing that his next words would change everything for the royal family. The protocol was clear, but the reality of arresting the queen consort felt surreal and terrifying. "Control, this is Morrison." He spoke into the device, his voice professionally calm despite the chaos in his mind. "I need an immediate response team to the queen consort's private study. Priority Alpha situation." "Copy that, Morrison," came the crisp reply from the palace security control room. "Response team en route. ETA 2 minutes. Do you need medical assistance?" Morrison glanced at Charlotte, who was standing perfectly still, her face composed but her eyes still blazing with anger. "Negative on medical. This is a security incident requiring immediate documentation and witness statements." Camilla began to pace frantically around the room, her earlier composure completely shattered. "This is madness," she muttered, running her hands through her carefully styled hair. "James, surely you can't be serious about this. We can resolve this matter privately. There's no need to involve anyone else." Morrison kept his eyes focused on Charlotte, waiting for her instructions. His duty was clear, but he knew that whatever happened in the next few minutes would reverberate through the monarchy for years to come. "Captain Morrison," Charlotte said formally, "please ensure that this incident is documented according to standard protocol for assaults on members of the royal family. I want everything done by the book." "Your Royal Highness," Camilla pleaded, her voice cracking with desperation, "please reconsider. Think about what this will do to the family. The scandal will destroy us." Charlotte turned to face her with an expression of cold determination. "You should have thought about that before you assaulted me. Actions have consequences, and no one is above the law, not even the queen consort." The sound of boots in the corridor announced the arrival of the response team. Morrison moved to the door as 4 royal protection officers entered the room, their faces carefully neutral despite the extraordinary circumstances. Sergeant Phillips, Morrison's second-in-command, approached with practiced professionalism. "Captain," Phillips said quietly, "what's the situation?" Morrison took a deep breath, knowing that his next words would make the incident official and irreversible. "Sergeant Phillips, I witnessed an assault on Her Royal Highness Princess Charlotte by Her Majesty the Queen Consort. The assault consisted of spitting on the princess's person during a verbal altercation." Phillips's face remained impassive, but Morrison caught the slight widening of his eyes that betrayed his shock. "Understood, sir. Do you require the suspect to be taken into custody?" Camilla gasped audibly at being referred to as a suspect. "This is preposterous," she declared, her voice shaking. "I am the queen consort. You cannot treat me like a common criminal." Charlotte stepped forward, her bearing every inch that of a future queen. "Sergeant Phillips, please proceed with standard arrest procedures. The queen consort is not above the law." Phillips looked between Charlotte and Camilla, clearly struggling with the unprecedented nature of the situation. "Your Royal Highness, with respect, this is an extremely delicate matter. Perhaps we should contact the king before proceeding." "The king will be informed in due course," Charlotte replied firmly. "But first, proper procedures must be followed. The rule of law applies to everyone in this country, including members of the royal family." Morrison watched as his colleagues processed the situation. He could see them mentally reviewing their training, searching for protocols that covered arresting a member of the royal family. The irony wasn't lost on him that they were trained to protect these people from arrest, not to arrest them themselves. "Ma'am," Phillips addressed Camilla with careful formality, "I need to inform you that you are being detained on suspicion of assault. You are not obliged to say anything, but it may harm your defense if you do not mention when questioned something which you later rely on in court." Camilla's face went white as the formal caution was delivered. "This is a nightmare," she whispered, sinking into her desk chair. "Charles will never forgive this humiliation. The king will understand that justice must be served," Charlotte replied coldly. "He has always maintained that the royal family should be held to the highest standards of behavior." One of the younger officers, Constable Williams, stepped forward with restraints, clearly uncertain about how to proceed. Morrison had seen the young man handle dangerous situations with confidence, but restraining the queen consort was obviously beyond anything he had been prepared for. "Constable Williams," Morrison instructed, "please secure the suspect for transport to the custody suite. Standard procedures apply." Williams approached Camilla with obvious reluctance. "Ma'am, I need you to stand and place your hands behind your back." Camilla remained seated, staring at him in disbelief. "You cannot be serious. I am 76 years old. I am not going to resist or attempt to escape. Surely handcuffs are unnecessary." Morrison considered the request, weighing security protocols against the unprecedented circumstances. "Your Majesty, if you give your word that you will comply fully with all instructions, we can forego the restraints during transport." "I give you my word," Camilla replied with what remained of her dignity. "Though I maintain that this entire proceeding is a travesty of justice." Charlotte watched the exchange with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. She had never wanted things to escalate to this point, but Camilla's actions had left her with no choice. The assault had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. "Captain Morrison," Charlotte said, "please ensure that the palace press office is notified that I will be delayed for today's charity engagement. They should prepare a statement explaining that I was detained by urgent family business." "Of course, Your Royal Highness. Shall I contact your private secretary to reschedule?" "Yes, but make it clear that we will honor our commitment to the children's hospital as soon as possible. They shouldn't suffer because of this situation." Morrison admired Charlotte's composure and her concern for others even in the midst of this crisis. It confirmed his belief that she would make an excellent queen when her time came. Sergeant Phillips approached with a tablet computer for documentation. "Your Royal Highness, I need to record your formal statement regarding the incident. Are you prepared to provide details at this time?" Charlotte nodded firmly. "Absolutely. I want everything documented while it's fresh in everyone's memory." She began to recount the events leading up to the assault, speaking clearly and precisely. Morrison was impressed by her ability to remain objective and factual despite the emotional nature of the encounter. "The verbal altercation began when Her Majesty criticized my speech at last week's environmental summit," Charlotte began. "She stated that my comments about climate change were inappropriate and politically naive. I defended my position, explaining that I believe the monarchy must remain relevant to contemporary concerns." Phillips typed rapidly on his tablet, capturing every detail. "Please continue, Your Royal Highness." The conversation became increasingly heated as Her Majesty expressed her belief that the royal family should maintain strict political neutrality and distance from public issues. I disagreed, stating that silence in the face of crisis constitutes complicity. Camilla listened to the recitation with growing agitation. "You're making it sound like I'm some sort of reactionary monster," she protested. "I was simply trying to provide guidance based on decades of experience." "Ma'am," Phillips said firmly, "you'll have an opportunity to provide your own statement. Please allow Her Royal Highness to complete hers without interruption." Charlotte continued her account, describing how the conversation had escalated through personal insults and historical grievances. When she reached the moment of the assault itself, her voice remained steady, but Morrison could see the effort it cost her. "Her Majesty approached me until she was approximately 6 inches from my face," Charlotte stated. "She called me a spoiled, ungrateful witch, and said she should have put me in my place years ago. She then gathered saliva in her mouth and spat directly onto my face." The clinical description of such a degrading act made the incident seem even more shocking. Phillips continued typing, his face carefully neutral as he recorded the historic testimony. "Captain Morrison," Phillips addressed his superior, "please provide your witness statement for the record." Morrison stepped forward, knowing that his words would be scrutinized by lawyers, historians, and the media. "I observed the entire altercation from beginning to end. I can confirm that Her Royal Highness Princess Charlotte's account is accurate and complete. The assault occurred exactly as she described. Were there any other witnesses present? Phillips asked. No, Sergeant. Only the three principals were in the room when the incident occurred. Phillips turned to Camilla, who was slumped in her chair looking older than her 76 years. Ma'am, do you wish to provide a statement at this time, or would you prefer to wait until you've consulted with legal counsel? Camilla looked up with tired eyes. What's the point? You've already decided I'm guilty. Nothing I say will change that. Ma'am, Phillips replied professionally. You have the right to remain silent, but you also have the right to present your version of events. The choice is entirely yours. Camilla struggled to her feet, accepting assistance from Constable Williams. I want to speak to my husband before I say anything else. I want King Charles informed of this situation immediately. Morrison stepped forward. Your Majesty, His Majesty the King will be notified as soon as you've been processed and secured. Palace protocol requires that all family members be informed of serious incidents involving other family members. Serious incidents, Camilla repeated bitterly. Is that what we're calling family arguments now? Ma'am, Charlotte interjected, her voice sharp. Spitting on someone is not an argument. It's an assault, and it would be treated as such regardless of who committed it or who the victim was. Morrison could see that Camilla was beginning to understand the full implications of her actions. The reality that she would be processed through the criminal justice system like any other suspect was clearly sinking in. Where will I be taken? Camilla asked quietly. To the palace custody suite initially, Morrison replied. You'll be formally processed there, and then we'll determine next steps based on the severity of the charges and the recommendations of the Crown Prosecution Service. Camilla's lawyer training from decades earlier seemed to kick in as she processed this information. I assume I'll be allowed to contact my solicitor? Of course, ma'am. You have the same rights as any other person in your position. The formal language was clearly bothering Camilla, who had grown accustomed to the deference and special treatment that came with her position. Being treated like an ordinary suspect was perhaps the most jarring aspect of the entire experience. Shall we proceed to the custody suite? Phillips asked Morrison. Morrison nodded, then turned to Charlotte. Your Royal Highness, do you require any additional medical attention or support services? Charlotte shook her head. Thank you, Captain, but I'm fine. I would like to be informed of all developments in this case as they occur. Of course, Your Royal Highness. You'll be kept fully informed throughout the process. As the security team prepared to escort Camilla from the study, she made one final appeal to Charlotte. Please, she said, her voice breaking slightly. Please reconsider this course of action. Think about what this will do to your father, to the family, to the monarchy itself. Charlotte met her eyes with unwavering determination. I have thought about it. I've thought about what it means when people in positions of power believe they can act without consequences. I've thought about what it means when we expect others to follow laws that we ourselves ignore. She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. Most importantly, I've thought about what kind of queen I want to be. I want to be someone who stands for justice and equality, even when it's difficult, even when it costs me personally. Morrison felt a surge of pride as he listened to Charlotte's words. In the space of an hour, he had watched her transform from a young princess into a true leader. Her handling of this crisis demonstrated the kind of character that would serve the country well when she eventually took the throne. Time to go, ma'am, Phillips said gently to Camilla. As they prepared to leave the study, Morrison caught Charlotte's eye. Your Royal Highness, I want you to know that I believe you've handled this situation with remarkable courage and integrity. Your great-grandmother would be proud. Charlotte smiled for the first time since the incident occurred. Thank you, Captain. That means more to me than you know. The procession that left Camilla's study was unlike anything in the palace's long history. The Queen Consort, flanked by 4 royal protection officers, walked slowly down the corridors she had traversed as a figure of authority for nearly 20 years. Now she was just another suspect being taken into custody. Palace staff members they encountered along the way stopped and stared in disbelief. Word of the incident would spread throughout the building within minutes, Morrison knew, despite strict instructions about confidentiality. By evening, every employee would know that the Queen Consort had been arrested for assaulting the future queen. As they approached the custody suite, Morrison's radio crackled to life. Morrison, This is control. We're getting urgent requests from the king's private secretary for information about a security incident. How should we respond? Morrison glanced at Phillips, who nodded understanding. Control, please inform the king's private secretary that His Majesty will be briefed as soon as the immediate security situation is resolved. Estimated time 15 minutes. Copy that, Morrison. The private secretary emphasized that the king is expecting immediate notification of any developments. Morrison could only imagine King Charles's reaction when he learned that his wife had been arrested for assaulting his daughter. The conversation would undoubtedly be one of the most difficult in the king's life. As they entered the custody suite, Camilla looked around at the stark, institutional surroundings with obvious distress. The room was designed for processing ordinary criminals, not members of the royal family, and its harsh fluorescent lighting and metal furniture were a stark contrast to the palace's elegant interiors. "Ma'am," the custody sergeant, a veteran officer named Thompson, addressed Camilla with professional courtesy. "I need to process you according to standard procedures. Please have a seat while I review the details of your case." Camilla sat heavily in the plastic chair, looking smaller and more vulnerable than Morrison had ever seen her. The reality of her situation was clearly beginning to sink in as she found herself in surroundings that emphasized her sudden change in status from royalty to suspect.